Many businesses do some sort of quarterly planning, a process where we bring together usually the leadership team and we bring them together for perhaps a day and we look at what we did in the last quarter. We look at where the business maybe is looking to grow, where we're having challenges. We might look at the annual strategy and indeed the 3 or 5 year strategy. And then we take a view on what we need to achieve in the next quarter. We plan that out and we obviously try and execute it. And I've seen this process called quarterly objectives. I've seen them called rocks. Many people follow the process that's called OKRs, popularized by Google and before Google Intel. But the problem with most of these processes is that they often don't work. And I've seen this time and again as a coach going into businesses where I'm actually coaching businesses through running a quarterly planning process. And sadly, I've seen it in my own business as well. Everybody comes together for the day. We have a euphoria, an epiphany, we have clarity, and we have a lot of energy around the goals that we've chosen to execute against. But something goes wrong mid-quarter. When we come back a quarter later, we are usually looking at goals or objectives that simply weren't executed and weren't met. We had an idea 3 months ago, but what happened? And the first problem is that a good idea that can't be executed is not a good idea. Now, where this starts, the first problem that I see with most of these processes is the use of the acronym SMART. First of all, we set a SMART goal. And I've seen leadership team at pains to put together the perfect SMART goal, SMART statement, and get the wording right so that it fits in with specific and measurable and achievable. But it doesn't really cover off everything that you need to do in order to execute an objective. There's nothing really wrong with SMART other than it doesn't go far enough, and it gives you the illusion that if you get this acronym, if you tick these boxes, that you'll be able to execute against it, but often you can't. I've got a better process, a 6-step process to ensure that an objective can be planned out and executed against. The first thing is to get clear of the goal. Of course, you've got to be clear about what the goal is. And you can use the SMART acronym in order to get clear on what the goal is. It needs to be specific and measurable. We know that. What is the outcome going to look like? Remember, in order to hold ourselves and one another accountable, we have to have absolute clarity around what the objective is, what the end goal is going to look like when it is done. Generalizations kill clarity. We have to have clarity in order to execute against it. So get clear against your goal. Then, how are we going to measure this? We want to come up with KPIs and targets for those KPIs. Remember, a KPI is not itself inherently a target. If you want to reduce your weight, the KPI is weight. The target is the specific number you're going for. So you want KPIs and you want targets. You have to have the measurements in there so that you know what this goal is going to look like. Let me give you an example. Recent personal example, we're looking to get 1.8 million in new revenue from partners. 1.8 million. Simple, clear goal. It would have a date as well, of course. Now, the KPI could be any number of iterations of how many partners and how much revenue from each partner. Let's say, hypothetically, 10 partners, 180K each. There's a set of KPIs and targets. We might have others as well, but it could be one partner 1.8 million or 100 partners 18K each. So breaking down that goal of 1.8 million into how that's going to be made up, what the KPIs are going to be and what the target is for each KPI is essential. Remember, we must have clarity. Lack of clarity is the enemy of accountability. We want to get these goals done. Different people might have different ideas, and maybe you don't care so long as you hit your 1.8 million, but your strategy for getting there is going to be very different if you're looking for 100 partners or 10 partners or one big whale. So we've got our goal, we've got our KPI, and we've got our target, but the next number that we need in order to really nail down the clarity here is the drivers. What is going to drive the performance of this KPI? How are we going to achieve these, let's say it's 10 partners and 180K each, how are we going to achieve that? What is driving that? Is that a number of meetings? Is it how many cold emails you send? Is it how many exhibitions that you attend? What are going to be the actual driving actions, the numbers that you'll be able to measure, your leading indicators, if you like, that are going to drive performance? You want to decide that up front here in step 3, because step 4 is your resources. You've got to plan out the resources that you require for this objective. Otherwise, How do you know if you're going to be able to execute against it? Who is approving these resources? And obviously it makes a lot of difference if you're going to do this entirely by cold email or if you're going to do it by exhibition attendance, particularly if those exhibitions are going to be in another country. So what's the budget that you're going to need? What other resources? What tools? Is there any training required? What other people are going to be required? How much people time is required? Is that time available? You need to check all of this off before you decide that this is the objective that you're going to plan out and execute against. And then step 4 is to look at your risks. To assume that there is no risk would be foolhardy, and to assume that risk is met with reward is also foolhardy. Most of the time, high risk gives a higher chance of failure. If there's a high risk here, again, do we want to put those resources to work in the business and execute against this if we have a very high risk of failure? What do we want to look at with risk? We could look at various factors. One of them, the first thing to really look at, is assumptions. What assumptions are we making here? Now, when we're in the room with our leadership team and we've got a lot of hubris and optimism, we don't think that there are any assumptions that we're not really aware of. We just think everything's rosy. We can do this. But if we really want to be absolutely critical and look at the assumptions and be more critical in our thinking, we're assuming that this will be easy. We're assuming people open my emails. We're assuming that I can get to these exhibitions, or whatever we might be assuming. We might assume that the exchange rate is going to stay stable. We might assume this economy is going to stay stable. We assume that we're going to keep certain customers in play. There's all sorts of working assumptions that we have. Then we want to identify those up front, because if those are stacked and we actually identify that together there's a higher risk of failure, this is important to assess up front. Another risk that we want to look at is critical success factors, other things that we may need to execute on, or we may rely on other people to execute on in order for us to achieve our objective, to achieve those results. So what are the assumptions? What are the critical success factors? What other risks are in play? We want to do a miniature risk assessment. And then step 6 is to plan out the milestones. Now, milestones here means results, not tasks and activities. Tasks and activities come in your plan. That's after my 6 steps. The point here is that you don't want to spend time planning out an objective if you haven't even assessed whether truly this is one that you can execute against and are willing to assign company resources to execute against. So we want to set out the milestones. If this is a 3-month objective, you maybe want to set milestones every 2, 3, or perhaps 4 weeks. It could be milestones around specific KPIs being met as you progress through this, but you want to look at what the results are going to be at periods of time between now and the end date, because there is nothing worse than getting to the end date and realizing it is too late to catch up. We need to have milestones to assess our progress against, and that is what you have milestones as in step 6. Looking at all of this, having your goal, your KPIs and targets, your performance drivers, your resources, your risks, and your milestones, then you can assess if this is an objective that you want to execute against, and then make a better plan and have much higher rate of success executing against this during the quarter or whatever that longer period of time is that you're making this plan for. Go and execute.